Rex watching as Mike boards the train. His ears droop, and he lets out a small whine as the train pulls away. It was a warm, sunny day at the train station, with a gentle breeze blowing through the air. The platform was busy with people hurrying about, but for Mike, time seemed to slow down. Dressed in his crisp military uniform, he knelt down beside his German shepherd, Rex. Rex, his loyal companion, was sitting quietly, his brown eyes fixed on Mike's face. He didn't understand why Mike was wearing that uniform or why they were at this noisy place. All Rex knew was that something was about to change, and it made him uneasy. Mike placed his hand on Rex's head, scratching behind his ears, just like Rex loved. "Take care of things while I'm gone, buddy," Mike said softly, his voice calm but with a hint of sadness. "I'll be back before you know it." Rex tilted his head slightly, as if trying to understand Mike's words. He wagged his tail once, weakly, but his eyes looked worried. Mike chuckled and gave him a reassuring pat on the back. "Come on, don't look at me like that. You're the toughest dog I know." The train's whistle echoed through the station, loud and sharp, making Rex's ears perk up. People began gathering their bags and heading toward the train. Mike stood up slowly, brushing off his uniform. Rex followed his movement with his eyes, his tail now completely still. "Stay strong for me, Rex," Mike said as he adjusted the strap on his bag. "You're in charge now." He knelt one last time, pressing his forehead gently against Rex's. "I'll miss you, buddy." Rex let out a low whine, sensing that Mike was about to leave. He leaned closer, pressing his head against Mike's chest. The bond between them was unspoken, but it was clear, they were more than just a man and his dog. They were family. As Mike stood up and turned toward the train, Rex stayed where he was, sitting still but watching his every step. Mike looked back over his shoulder and smiled. "Be a good boy, okay?" The train's whistle blew again, this time signaling its departure. Mike stepped onto the train, waving once before disappearing inside. Rex didn't move. He kept his eyes fixed on the train as it began to pull away, the wheels clanking against the tracks. For a moment, Rex's ears drooped, and he let out another soft whine. His tail, which had been wagging earlier, now hung low. He didn't understand where Mike was going or why he couldn't follow, but he sat there, waiting, as the train disappeared into the distance. The sun continued to shine, and the platform slowly emptied as people left. But Rex stayed, his eyes locked on the tracks, as if he believed that any moment, Mike would return. The loyalty in his heart was unshakable. Rex didn't know how long it would take, but one thing was certain, he would wait for Mike, no matter what. As the train disappeared into the horizon, Rex stood on the platform, his eyes fixed on the tracks. His ears drooped, and his tail hung low, but he didn't move. The station was quiet now, with only a few people walking by, but Rex stayed in the same spot, waiting for Mike to come back. The first evening passed, and when the sun began to set, Rex slowly walked home. But the very next day, as the evening train approached, he was back at the station. He sat on the same spot near the platform, his head turning toward the tracks as soon as he heard the whistle of the train. One by one, passengers stepped off, but Mike wasn't among them. Still, Rex waited, his eyes scanning every face, hoping to see his best friend. Day after day, Rex returned to the station. It didn't matter if the sun was shining brightly or if rain poured from the sky. He would sit patiently by the platform, his ears perking up at every train whistle. He never barked or caused a fuss, he just sat there, waiting, watching. The people in town began to notice the loyal dog. A few stopped to pet him, some offered him treats, but Rex wasn't interested. His eyes were always on the tracks, searching for Mike. A kind station worker, an older man named Joe, started bringing Rex a small bowl of food every evening. "You've got a big heart, buddy," Joe would say as he set the bowl down. "But you've got to take care of yourself too." Rex would eat a little, just enough to keep going, but he never left his spot for long. Joe often sat beside him, talking softly, even though Rex never responded. "You're waiting for someone, aren't you?" Joe said one evening, wiping the rain off his hat. "I don't know who it is, but they must be real special." As the weeks turned into months, Rex became a familiar sight at the train station. Passengers would point him out, telling each other about the loyal dog who waited every single day. Some children brought him blankets during the colder months, draping them gently over his back while he sat unmoving. Others left small bowls of water or food near his spot. Rex didn't understand their kindness, he only knew he had to stay. The train tracks were his lifeline, the last place he had seen Mike. He didn't know why Mike hadn't come back or what had happened. He only knew that this was where he needed to be. Day after day, week after week, Rex returned to the spot where he last saw Mike, the narrator's voice would say. He didn't know why Mike hadn't come back, he only knew he had to wait. Through the changing seasons, Rex's loyalty never wavered. Whether it was the sweltering heat of summer or the bitter cold of winter, Rex remained at the platform. His hope never faded, his patience never ran out. For Rex, it didn't matter how long it took. He believed, deep in his heart, that one day, Mike would return. It was a quiet afternoon when the knock came at Mike's family home. Mike's mother, a kind woman with soft eyes and silver streaks in her hair, opened the door. Standing there were two soldiers in uniform, their faces heavy with sorrow. In their hands, they held a folded flag and an envelope. "Ma'am," one of the soldiers said gently, his voice trembling. "We have news about your son." The words hit her like a thunderclap. She stood frozen for a moment, clutching the doorframe for support. Her heart pounded, and she could barely breathe as the soldier continued. "Mike went missing in action during his deployment. We haven't been able to locate him." Tears welled up in her eyes as she stepped back, letting the soldiers into the house. Mike's father came to her side, his face pale, as they both listened to the devastating news. "We're still searching," the soldier added, trying to offer some hope. "But as of now, there's no confirmation of his whereabouts." The silence in the room was deafening. Mike's mother sat down slowly, holding the folded flag in her lap, her tears falling freely now. "How could this happen?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He was supposed to come home." In the corner of the room, Rex lay on his bed, his ears twitching as if he could sense the tension in the air. He stood up and padded over to Mike's mother, resting his head on her knee. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly, her tears falling onto his coat. "Oh, Rex," she said softly. "You don't understand, do you?" For Rex, life hadn't changed. Every day, he still returned to the train station, waiting for the moment when Mike would step off the train and call his name. He didn't understand the conversations happening around him, the sorrow in the air, or the tears on Mike's mother's face. A few days later, Mike's parents stood by the window, watching as Rex left the house once again, heading toward the train station. His steps were steady, purposeful, as though he was on a mission. Mike's mother wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve and turned to her husband. "He still thinks Mike is coming back," she said, her voice breaking. Her husband placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He doesn't know. All he knows is that he loves Mike and that he's waiting for him." At the train station, Rex took his usual spot near the platform. The people there had come to know him well, and they watched with quiet respect as he sat patiently, his eyes fixed on the tracks. His fur glistened in the sunlight, and his ears twitched at every sound, listening for the familiar whistle of the train. Back at home, Mike's mother looked at the framed photo of Mike in his uniform on the mantel. Her tears fell once more as she whispered to herself, "If only we could explain it to him. If only he knew." But Rex didn't need explanations. He didn't need to know the details or the reasons why Mike hadn't returned. All he needed was hope. His heart told him that one day, Mike would step off the train, and until that day came, Rex would keep waiting. For Mike's family, watching Rex's loyalty was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. He was a constant reminder of their loss but also of the unshakable bond between their son and his dog. As they watched Rex head to the train station every evening, they couldn't help but hope, just like Rex, that maybe, just maybe, Mike would come home. Time moved on, but Rex didn't. Every evening, without fail, he walked to the train station and sat in the same spot by the platform. The seasons came and went. Snow covered the ground in the winter, blanketing the station in white, but Rex stayed. He curled up in the cold, his breath visible in the icy air, but he never missed a day. When spring arrived, flowers bloomed around the station. The sun warmed the ground, and birds chirped in the distance. Yet, Rex remained focused on the tracks, his eyes always scanning the horizon. His fur began to turn gray with age, but his spirit remained as strong as ever. The townspeople noticed Rex's unwavering routine. Many had grown used to seeing him sitting there, rain or shine, waiting patiently. Some felt sorry for him and started bringing him little gifts to make his wait more comfortable. In the winter, a kind older woman draped a thick blanket over his back to keep him warm. In the summer, children set up a small umbrella to provide shade from the scorching sun. Such a loyal dog, people would say, shaking their heads in admiration. Children loved Rex and often stopped to pet him as they walked by. One little girl brought him her leftover sandwich from school every day. "Here you go, Rex," she'd say with a smile, placing it gently in front of him. Rex would sniff the food, eat a little, and then return his gaze to the train tracks. It didn't take long for Rex's story to spread beyond the town. A local journalist noticed him one evening and asked one of the station workers, "Why does that dog sit there every day?" The worker smiled sadly and said, "He's waiting for his owner, a soldier who left years ago. The poor guy doesn't know his owner went missing. He's been coming here every day ever since." The journalist wrote an article titled, "Loyal Dog Waits 3 Years for His Soldier." The story went viral, touching hearts across the country. Soon, news crews arrived at the station, filming Rex as he sat quietly by the platform. People were moved by his devotion, and his story spread like wildfire. Visitors began traveling from far away just to see Rex. They brought treats, toys, and flowers, leaving them by his side as if to honor his loyalty. Some knelt down to take photos with him, while others simply stood at a distance, moved to tears by the sight of the faithful dog still waiting. Rex became a local legend. His story wasn't just about a dog waiting for his owner, it was about love, loyalty, and hope. People who came to see him often left feeling inspired, reminded of the power of devotion and the bond between a man and his dog. Though he never paid much attention to the crowd, Rex brought the town together. He didn't understand why so many people came to see him, his only focus was the train tracks. Day after day, as the seasons changed and the years passed, Rex waited. His fur grew grayer, his steps slower, but his hope never wavered. For the townspeople, Rex wasn't just a dog, he was a symbol of unwavering love and loyalty. And for Rex, every whistle of the train was a sign that maybe, just maybe, today would be the day Mike returned. It was a quiet evening at the train station, much like any other. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Rex lay in his usual spot near the platform, his head resting on his paws. His fur was grayer now, and his movements slower, but his eyes were still as focused as ever, watching the tracks. The familiar sound of a train whistle echoed in the distance. At first, Rex didn't react, he had heard that sound countless times before. But something about this whistle was different. His ears perked up, and he slowly lifted his head. As the train came into view, Rex pushed himself to his feet, his tail wagging slightly. The train pulled into the station, the brakes screeching softly as it came to a stop. Passengers began stepping off, carrying bags and chatting with each other. Rex's eyes scanned the crowd, his heart seeming to race with anticipation. Then, he froze. Through the sea of people, Rex spotted a familiar figure stepping off the train. It was a man in uniform, older now, with a cane in his hand and a slight limp in his step. His face was tired, but his eyes carried the same warmth that Rex had always known. It was Mike. Rex stood still for a moment, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then, without hesitation, he broke into a run. His legs wobbled as he moved, but he didn't care. His tail wagged furiously, and his bark, which hadn't been heard in years, echoed through the station. Mike, confused by the crowd that had gathered around the platform, looked up just in time to see Rex running toward him. His eyes widened in disbelief, and his cane nearly slipped from his hand. "Rex," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Rex didn't stop until he reached Mike, leaping up and planting his paws on Mike's chest. He licked Mike's face over and over, whining and barking in joy. Mike dropped his cane and wrapped his arms around Rex, holding him tightly. Tears streamed down Mike's face as he buried his face in Rex's fur. "You waited for me, buddy?" Mike said, his voice cracking with emotion. "After all this time?" Rex barked again, as if answering him, his tail wagging so hard it seemed like it might never stop. The crowd at the station watched in silence, many with tears in their eyes. A few people clapped, and soon, the entire station erupted in cheers. Some wiped their cheeks, touched by the emotional reunion between the soldier and his loyal dog. Mike pulled back slightly, looking into Rex's eyes. "You didn't give up on me, did you?" he said softly. Rex leaned his head against Mike's chest, his eyes closing as if to say, "I never would." For what felt like hours, the two of them stayed like that, wrapped in an unbreakable embrace. It was as if the years of waiting, the pain, and the separation melted away in that moment. Mike finally stood, using his cane for support, but Rex stayed close, leaning against him as if afraid to let him go again. The crowd parted as Mike and Rex began to walk, side by side, away from the platform. The sunset cast a golden glow over them, making the scene look like something out of a dream. Rex's loyalty had been unwavering, and now, after years of waiting, his patience had been rewarded. For Mike, seeing Rex again was like coming home. For both of them, it was a moment of healing, love, and the unshakable bond that nothing, not even time, could break. Life became peaceful for Mike and Rex after their emotional reunion. Back at home, the two of them settled into a quiet and comforting routine. Rex, now older and slower, spent his days lounging in the sunny spots of the yard, his tail wagging gently whenever Mike was nearby. For Mike, seeing Rex happy and relaxed brought him a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. Every morning, Mike would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching Rex explore the yard. "You waited so long for me, buddy," Mike would say softly. "Now it's my turn to take care of you." Rex would wag his tail in response, always staying close to Mike's side. But as the days passed, Mike realized he wanted to do more. Rex's loyalty had shown him just how much dogs could give to humans, and how much humans owed them in return. Inspired by Rex's story, Mike decided to dedicate his time to helping other soldiers and their dogs. He began working with a local shelter, focusing on dogs left behind by servicemen and women. Many of these dogs had lost their families to deployment or tragedy, and Mike made it his mission to find them loving homes. He also started a program to connect retired soldiers with rescue dogs, believing that both could help heal each other. The community rallied behind Mike's efforts, inspired by Rex's story. Donations poured in, and the shelter expanded its work, saving more dogs and changing more lives. Mike often told people, "Rex didn't just wait for me." He reminded all of us what loyalty and love truly mean. To honor Rex's incredible devotion, the town decided to create a memorial at the train station. One sunny afternoon, a small crowd gathered near the platform where Rex had waited for so many years. In the center of the gathering was a beautiful bronze plaque, with Rex's pawprint engraved at the bottom. The plaque read, "In memory of loyalty beyond words. Dedicated to Rex, whose love and devotion reminded us all of the unbreakable bond between humans and their dogs." As Mike stood in front of the plaque, with Rex sitting faithfully by his side, he felt a swell of pride and gratitude. He knelt down, wrapping his arms around Rex. "This is for you, buddy," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've touched more lives than you'll ever know." The ceremony ended with applause, and Rex, as always, wagged his tail at the sound of the cheers. Though he didn't understand the words, he knew he was surrounded by love. That evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Mike and Rex took a walk together. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the soft rustling of leaves filled the air. Rex stayed close to Mike, his steps slow but steady, their bond stronger than ever. As they walked into the sunset, a sense of peace and fulfillment surrounded them. Mike looked down at Rex and smiled. "You've been my hero, Rex. You reminded the world that some heroes don't wear uniforms, they have 4 legs and endless love."